Welcome back to Talk Tensors. We love to dig into the latest machine learning research, and today we're tackling a paper that really caught our eye.
Oh, yeah, this one's a fascinating one.
It's all about measuring those wrinkles and folds on the surface of the brain.
The sulci.
Right, the sulci, exactly.
And you might think, well, measuring depth, that seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, I mean, we measure distances all the time in the real world.
But the brain throws a few curveballs our way.
Okay, so what's the catch? Why is measuring sulcal depth so tricky?
Well, imagine you're trying to compare the wrinkles on a prune to the vast canyons on Mars. You see the problem.
Yeah, both the depressions, but the scale is just completely different.
Exactly. And that's the crux of the issue when comparing sulcal depth across different brains. You've got variations in brain size due to age, species, you name it.
So it's like comparing apples and oranges, or prunes and planets, I guess, in this case.
Yeah. You got it. And that's where this paper, DPF, improved depth potential function for scale-invariant sulcal depth estimation, steps in.
DPF star. Okay, so they're proposing a new method.
A new method that can accurately measure sulcal depth, no matter the size of the brain.
So DPF is scale-invariant?
Precisely. Think of it as a measuring tape that magically adjusts itself to whatever you're measuring.
That's pretty cool.
It is, and it relies on this mathematical concept called a scale-controlled family of functions.
Okay. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that one.
Well, imagine you're baking a cake, right? And you've got this recipe that works perfectly for a small cake.
Right.
But what if you want to bake a massive cake, a giant cake? You can't just use the same amount of ingredients.
No, you'd have to scale up the recipe, increase everything proportionally.
Exactly. And that's essentially what DPF does. It uses this mathematical framework to adjust its measurements based on the size of the brain.
So no more apples and oranges.
No more apples and oranges. And this is huge because now researchers can compare brains across different ages, species, even individuals with different brain sizes.
So DPF solves this measurement problem. But why should we care? What's the big deal about measuring sulcal depth accurately?
Well, sulcal depth isn't just some random anatomical feature. It's thought to be related to all sorts of cognitive functions and neurological conditions.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Researchers have found links between sulcal depth and conditions like autism, schizophrenia, even Alzheimer's disease.
So could we use this to diagnose these conditions?
Potentially, yeah. Early diagnosis is critical for effective treatment and intervention. Imagine if we could spot tiny variations in sulcal depth that might indicate a risk for these conditions.
That would be incredible, but hold on. This paper focuses on measurement, not diagnosis, right?
You're absolutely right. But it's important to see the bigger picture, the potential impact.
Absolutely. So to understand where this all fits in, let's take a step back. What's the history of measuring sulcal depth? How did we get here?
Well, scientists have been fascinated by these brain folds for centuries. Even early anatomists recognized that these intricate patterns weren't random, but they lacked the tools to really quantify them.
So it was all very qualitative back then.
Exactly. But then came neuroimaging techniques like MRI.
Right. We can suddenly visualize and measure the brain in amazing detail.
And that led to new methods for quantifying cortical folding, what we call gyrification.
Like the gyrification index. I remember reading about that.
Right. That measures the overall wrinkliness of the brain.
But it doesn't tell us about the depth of the individual folds. The sulci.
And that's where we needed something more nuanced, something like DPF. We needed to go deeper than just overall wrinkliness.
We needed to know the depth of those canyons, not just how many canyons there are.
Precisely. DPF gives us a much more precise map of those folds, no matter the size of the brain.
So it builds on previous research, but also represents a significant leap forward. This is exciting stuff. DPF's giving us a whole new level of precision in understanding sulcal depth. So with that in mind, let's shift gears a bit and get a little speculative.
Time for novel notions.
You know it.
Okay, so we've established that DPF offers a more accurate, reliable way to measure sulcal depth. But you might be wondering, how did the researchers actually test this new method?
Yeah, it's not like they can just grab a ruler and physically measure those folds in the brain, right?
Right, exactly. The brain's a pretty delicate organ, so they had to take a different approach.
So how do they go about proving that DPF actually works?
Well, they focused on validating what they call the anatomical relevance of DPF measurements.
Okay, but how do you validate something that's essentially a mathematical model?
They started with something very hands-on. They manually traced specific anatomical landmarks on a set of brains.
So like using a map to navigate a new city, you look for those key landmarks to make sure you're on the right track?
Exactly. They focused on points where the folds are most prominent, those deep valleys in the brain's landscape, and they used those as a reference point.
So instead of a physical ruler, they use these anatomical landmarks as their ground truth.
Precisely. And the results, well, they showed that DPF, when properly tuned, consistently outperformed existing methods in capturing these key anatomical features.
Hold on, properly tuned. What does that mean?
Ah, good question. DPF actually has a parameter called alpha that lets researchers fine-tune the level of detail they're capturing.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about this alpha parameter.
Think of it like adjusting the zoom level on Google Maps. You can zoom out to see entire continents or zoom in to see individual streets and buildings.
Right.
Alpha works in a similar way. A low alpha value means you're looking at those larger, more global features of the brain. But as you increase the alpha value, you zoom in, focusing on those finer details, those subtle variations in sulcal depth.
So depending on the research question, scientists can adjust DPF to capture the level of detail that's most relevant to their work.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that makes DPF so powerful, its adaptability. It's a versatile tool that can be applied to a wide range of research questions.
All right, so we've talked about how DPF works, how it was validated, but let's circle back to the why of it all. What are the potential applications of this research? We touched on the clinical side, but what about its implications for basic research in neuroscience?
Well, DPF could be a game changer for studying the relationship between brain structure and function. We've known for a long time that different areas of the brain are specialized for different tasks.
Right, like how Broca's area is involved in language production.
Exactly. Now, imagine being able to compare sulcal depth in Broca's area between individuals who excel at language skills versus those who struggle. Could differences in sulcal depth, as measured by DPF, offer insights into why some people are naturally gifted linguists while others find it more challenging?
So we could potentially link brain structure to specific cognitive abilities.
It's a tantalizing possibility. And this method could be applied to study all sorts of cognitive functions, potentially leading to a deeper understanding of individual differences in learning, memory, attention, even personality traits.
It's like we're peering into the machinery of the mind, trying to understand how the physical structure of the brain gives rise to the unique tapestry of human experience.
And potentially challenge some of our long-held assumptions about intelligence, talent, and what it means to be normal.
Okay, now we're really getting into the deep philosophical stuff.
Maybe we can save that for another episode. For now, let's stick to the science. While DPF is undoubtedly a powerful tool, it's important to acknowledge that this research is still in its early stages. There are many questions that remain unanswered.
All right, so what are the caveats, the limitations of DPF that we need to keep in mind?
Well, while DPF addresses the issue of brain size variations, there are still other factors that could influence sulcal depth measurements. Things like genetics, environmental influences, and even individual differences in brain development that go beyond simple scaling.
So DPF is a powerful tool, but it's not a magic bullet.
Exactly. More research is needed to fully understand the complex interplay of factors that shape the intricate folds of our brains. But even with those caveats in mind, it's clear that this research has the potential to significantly advance our understanding of the brain.
Absolutely, and that's why we're so excited to be discussing it here on Talk Tensors.
Yeah.
We're always on the lookout for groundbreaking research that pushes the boundaries of what we know about machine learning and its applications in neuroscience.
Speaking of pushing boundaries, shall we indulge in a bit of speculation with our novel notions segment?
Okay, novel notions time. So we have this amazing new tool, DPF, that can precisely map those intricate folds in our brains. What if we take it a step further? What if we combine it with another cutting-edge technology that's been making waves, generative AI?
Ooh, now that's an interesting thought. Generative AI has been showing some remarkable capabilities in various fields, from creating realistic images to composing music, but how do you see it being applied to something as complex as brain morphology?
Well, we already have these powerful generative models like DALL-E 2 and ChatGPT that can learn patterns from massive data sets and create these incredibly realistic outputs. What if we trained a generative AI on a huge data set of DPF measurements taken across different ages and populations?
You're thinking we could essentially create a model that can predict how an individual's sulcal depth might change over time, almost like a personalized brain development forecast.
Exactly. Imagine having a model that could take a DPF scan of a young child and then project with a high degree of accuracy how their brain might develop over the next decade or two.
That would be remarkable. We could potentially identify individuals at risk for developmental disorders much earlier than we can now.
And early intervention is key when it comes to developmental disorders. Imagine being able to tailor interventions and support strategies based on an individual's predicted brain trajectory.
It would be a paradigm shift in how we approach mental health care, moving from reactive treatment to proactive prevention.
It sounds like science fiction, but with the rapid advancements in both machine learning and neuroscience, it might not be as far-fetched as it seems.
It's certainly an exciting possibility, but as with any powerful technology, there are potential downsides we need to consider.
Right. What kind of challenges do you foresee with this hypothetical brain predicting AI?
One major concern is bias. If the training dataset isn't sufficiently diverse and representative of the population, the model could make inaccurate or even discriminatory predictions for certain individuals or groups.
So garbage in, garbage out, the quality of the predictions is only as good as the data it's trained on.
Exactly. Building such a model would require immense care and attention to data collection and ethical considerations.
It's a sobering reminder that even the most groundbreaking technologies come with responsibilities.
Indeed, but on a more optimistic note, I think it's also important to celebrate the ingenuity and creativity of researchers who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in both neuroscience and artificial intelligence.
Absolutely. DPF is a testament to the power of human curiosity and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Who knew that measuring the folds in our brains could lead to such profound insights?
It's a fascinating journey of discovery, and we're thrilled to be sharing it with our listeners here on Talk Tensors.
Well said. To all our listeners out there, if you're as intrigued by this research as we are, be sure to check out the full paper. We've got a link for you in the show notes. And until next time, keep those neural networks firing.
Until next time.